So here we are, episode 19, later than the 10 a.m. as advertised, teaching tangents.
I was going to ask you, you did advertise it. I didn't advertise it. I was not, sorry.
I didn't, but
You did not.
no, but my pupils, so because I'm doing 2 live streams now, the other live
That's
stream.
what I'm jealous of.
So the other live stream, a load of my pupils came and started messaging, but pupils do watch this one. And doing the other live stream with our mutual friend Adam, I was asked at school, so have you just ditched the other guy? I'm like, no, of course not. The conversations are completely different with Willem. I didn't say more interesting. I didn't say better. I just said.
Do they realize that they're very different?
Yeah, they do.
Is it because it's on your channel, the other one, and this one's on my channel?
It might be.
That they see more of it, or that there's more of them, or that you advertise. Oh, also, it might be not a Sunday morning, which is maybe.
I think that's got a lot to do with it, Sunday morning. Yeah. But it's on Spotify, and I haven't looked at how many people are listening. But I know people. There are pupils who are following on Spotify.
You're publishing the other one on. How do you call the other one again?
I haven't published any of the others on Spotify. I'm talking about teaching tangents on Spotify.
Oh, right. I need to update Spotify, by the way. I'm a few episodes behind.
That's okay. So I'm trying to guess the T-shirt you've got.
Aha! You noticed the head on top of it, right? But you didn't see the rest of it, so you're missing most of it.
Yeah. So is it? Okay, that's not what I was expecting, because you've got 2 of Luigi ones, haven't you?
I don't think Mario. So. I think this is the only one. I'm pretty sure I haven't worn this one yet.
No, you haven't, but you've definitely got another Mario. Sure. Mario, I'm pretty sure. Yes. Yeah, I thought, yes, you definitely have another Mario one.
I don't remember, maybe. I don't think so.
We'll have to look at previous episodes. That's a really good one.
It's good, right?
This isn't a pipe. I've got
for the students who don't know, this is a famous art piece of surrealist art piece by Magritte that says this is not a pipe, and obviously that's the reason why Mario has a hard time getting into it.
Because I
interrupted your T-shirt.
That's okay, but I love surrealism too. I love
surrealism.
Another double play. So, and it's a French reference as well. So it says the droid you are looking for, and it's got R2D2 and 3PO, but it's a reference to Daft Punk's cover for their album, which is the name of which has gone out of my head, which is one of my favorite albums. What's it called?
I can't remember the names of the albums of Daft Punk.
It's a great album. The closing track on that is one of my favorite tracks. I do loads of marking to that album for some reason, even though there's vocals on it. Random Access Memories, that's what it's called.
Okay, great. Good job. Remembering the random access memory in a directed way.
And I've got my...
is that Stranger Things?
Stranger Things cup mug. And I did want to reference the fact that you're finally reading.
Yeah, so this is a good thing that not that many people I know are watching this, but in case they are, it's embarrassing. Slightly embarrassing for me in my professional career to admit that I have not read this yet. So I pretend and talk about it a bunch because it's very popular in marketing circles, obviously. I say obviously, it's not obvious for anyone, but it's so good. I'm only at the beginning of the book.
Oh, it's amazing. It's pretty heavy going. I think it's amazing for teachers as well. I think teachers should read it.
I think it's amazing for everybody to understand what's going on in that. So Thinking Fast and Slow. Do you want to sum it up, or should I sum it up quickly about what it is? Or
sum it up. Go ahead. What you're
I can't sum up the whole book, but I can talk about what it is because I've done that before.
Well, say what you're getting from it. What are you getting from it?
So, it's a book by Daniel Kahneman, and also it's recounting all the research that he's done with his now passed away research partner Amos Tversky from the 70s to the 2000s to the noughties-ish. And the book is from 2011, Thinking Fast and Slow, but they're both psychologists, behavioral psychologists and behavioral economists. He won, but for the both of them, a Nobel Prize in 2006, I think, for all their research. And a lot of research into how we function, generally speaking. There's tons in there in this book. That a lot of it stems from this idea that we have two systems going on in our brains, two systems of thinking. And system one is everything that is automatic pilot. And system two is a slow, reflective, effortful thinking. And the first one is everything that's automatic. And the way that our brain generally works is that when you come across something for the first time, you have to go through slow effort to be able to get it until you're able to automate everything. So you don't have to think about walking anymore. But if you look at a small kid, they have to learn it, and it's a lot of work. But now it's integrated. And the same thing with cycling, and the same thing with a lot of other things. And from there, there's tons of different research. So I'm in the chapter about priming for now. One thing that just blew my mind about the priming was a lot of different stuff are blowing my mind, but how one is what I'm getting for myself, and what I know very well that the idea of a lazy thinker is in there, that our system two is very lazy and we want to automate everything, just like let it go on autopilot. And I say we as in human beings. And I knew I'm a very lazy thinker, but I'm just like now getting the science and the details behind how lazy I am, and figuring that I'm even lazier than I thought I was. And that the problem with a bat and a ball costs $1.10. Do you remember that one?
No.
Okay, so
the price of it, yeah.
So there's a problem that's been given by to get people to realize how we're intuitive thinkers all the time, and how it can lead us astray and be wrong, even though it sounds like it's right, because intuitively it seems right.
Cognitive biases.
And one of those tests is, and something that a lot of like graduates of high Princeton, Harvard, and universities, et cetera, got wrong at like over half, and a lot of other people get wrong everywhere all the time. And so the problem is a ball and a bat cost $1.10.
Mm-hmm.
A bat costs $1 more than a ball. How much is the ball?
And the intuitive answer is
10 cents.
Mm.
And then it gave the actual answer, and it didn't understand. And then I had to go on a website, and I was like, wait a minute, I don't understand.
I love the
I felt
fact
very, very, very silly. And I had to go
on
Quora, read 4 different explanations until I understood. Because I was like, I still don't understand why that's not the right answer.
Don't spoil it. Don't say anything. It's really good, because you really have to think. Really have to think about it. And
what's funny is the other ones they cite a little bit later 2 of the other problems that are a collection of 3 questions that are part of this test that is called, I can't remember, cognitive bias something. The 2 others made total sense to me. I got them immediately. I mean, not the intuitive answer. I understood the intuitive, and immediately I was like, yeah, I know that seems intuitively right, but that's wrong. I got the logic of it straight away. But the first one, I felt very, very, very stupid, because I was like, wow, I know it's not the right answer, but I don't understand why it's not the right answer.
I might have to put that in my lessons and see what happens. Because if I really wish behavioral economics existed when I went to university, it didn't really exist as a field much, and I would have studied it.
But they just rebranded. It was like, psychology tests. It's also very interesting. I love the stories and the way it's, because you said it's dense, but it's written in a very vulgarized and very easy way to read, because he's talking about stories.
Yeah.
Written in a storytelling language. And our system one likes stories because it's like an easy way to get it. That's another one I got. I mean, there's so much gold in this book of stuff that makes sense that I know from working in advertising. If you put things in very simple ways, they seem very easy. If you make it rhyme, it's even better. That's why I like aphorisms, syllogisms, rhyming, and
alliteration.
It's simple, and you say it with confidence, and you're golden. That's why everybody's like, oh yeah, totally. But then there's other things with, if you put more complicated words, then people don't necessarily remember or pay attention as much. but it's also interesting to see how they do these kinds of experiments, which I kind of knew, and it's always very funny. You know, a lot of psychologists of this kind, they're university researchers, academics. So all their research and all their guinea pigs are all students.
University students, yes.
They're all university students, and it's super interesting. But whenever any of one of those studies make headlines, and the headlines are usually disproportionate, because a lot of these things that we take for being true now, a lot of those are being researched and proven, but what does it mean? Because it's like, well, 20 students did that. I'm like, well, wait a minute. There's like nearly 8 billion people in the world. And you just talk to 20 students on a campus somewhere. It's a quick extrapolation. And then if by any chance it sounds amazing enough that you can like print some clickbaity headlines in today's age, then everybody's going to believe it's true. Now, it's gold for me, and this is horrible. I'm again going to reveal some things that I shouldn't be saying, but and I think I might have talked about this, but some people in my field in strategy, I think, believe that there's an actual real answer to things. We talked about this when we were talking about why last week, right? And I'm like, I think it's all relative. So my job is to sell the solution to the client, and ideally for the rationale, for the explanation to make sense and be solid enough. So very often it might be based on some psychological study and some clickbaity headlines to say this is how human beings function and this is why it's a good idea. It's not wrong because I don't have to prove anything. All I have to do is sell the thing. So whether it's actually true or not matters less to me than whether it's convincing.
This is interesting because in psychology we talk a lot about this. There's an acronym WEIRD. Is it a weird study? White, educated, industrialized, rich, and democratic. How is that representative of everything?
Totally. And most of the things that we read are like that. Sorry. I'm not sick. I just have something stuck in my throat.
A frog.
Possibly a frog, because I'm in France. That's why.
You said that, not me. So, but this idea of system 1, system 2, thinking through things does relate to the question, which we still haven't got to yet.
Yeah, great. We haven't got to the question. We're supposed to do that in these.
We're supposed to do that.
I knew I was going to talk over a while about this. I'm also reading this. This is crazy.
Oh my God.
I've had it on my shelves for a very long time. Have you ever heard of it?
No.
It's bonkers.
I'm not sure I want to. Who's it
It's
by?
a novel. It's a series of It's a trilogy of novels, by the way. Just
it's a novel. It's not, okay, all right.
It's a novel. It's not, but it's completely bonkers. And there's basically every possible reference to any kind of weird, conspiracy theory reference from the moment the book was written. I read a review of this thing. Some people say it's amazing. Some people say it's bonkers, but you have to guess past the 100 first pages because it's like reading a stream of consciousness. Where the characters, the story, the thing changes every paragraph and it never stops. It just keeps going and you're like, I have no idea what's going on here. and one review said, well, you could do an interesting game, which is just pick any page in the book and there's at least 5 references of things that you can go study. And each one of them is a whole field of weirdness of its own. And there's at least 5 to 10 on every page.
This is the reason I love Rick and Morty. That's the exact reason I love Rick and Morty.
And it's funny. It's meant to be funny. There's a lot of strange sex, so it's good for teenagers. Apparently, I was supposed to read this as a teenager, but I didn't get past through the 100 pages. So you have to try to hold on to get through the first 100 pages that are a little bit dense. It's quite old. I think it's in the 80s.
Oh, wow.
No, sorry. Okay. 75. Copyright. 1975. But it's quite celebrated as a completely bonkers fantasy sci-fi. It starts out as like I don't even know how it starts out as because the first 100 pages are very confusing, but it's sort of a investigation sort of because there's like 2 policemen inspectors that are searching through something. And they find out, and then it goes into weirder. I think it goes into fantasy, magic, and science fiction progressively.
Oh wow! Okay, you need to watch Bandersnatch at some point.
Yeah, I haven't seen
There
it
is a
yet.
link. There is a link between what I'm saying, the reason I said that. So
Sorry, the question.
yeah, so system one, system two, we talked about the way we think. So really, Thinking Fast and Slow is a book about the way we think and how our brains work, and how you can say something and it captures you, but you don't necessarily want to think about it because thinking can be tough. And I've got a statement like this for the question. So here's today's question, finally. Is the sentence, men are trash, offensive?
Wow. Is the sentence "men are trash" offensive?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, so I think who is this from? Is this one? This is from one of your students, is it? It's not from
No,
mine.
this is from one of yours.
Oh, it's from one of mine. Okay, great. That's good. Sorry, I don't know why I thought it was from a younger person than mine. I'm strongly suspecting that anything we're going to talk about or that I'm going to say is going to be applicable to whatever you want to put between the quotes "men are trash." Is this phrase offensive?
That's really interesting that you said that, because I agree with you. You could put, is blah, blah, blah offensive? A bit like when people say, no offense, but, and then say something offensive.
Yeah. So I think we'll definitely address the "men are trash," but or all men are trash. Sorry, right? Or men are trash.
No, not all. It just says men are trash.
Oh, men are trash. Is it offensive? So offensive depends. Offensive is in the eyes of the listener, the beholder. I'm sorry, because I tend to be a relativist, and I talked about that last week, or a pragmatist. I think from a philosophical or ideological standpoint, it's more of a pragmatist.
Okay.
So, as in, that means that things are relative to their context.
Mm-hmm.
You tell me that now, I don't find that offensive.
Mm.
Somebody else might, because technically it is. I mean, so is the phrase "men are trash"? You're making a statement. Obviously, you just said so. Of associating two things that are arguably not good. Well, so the trash part. So calling somebody trash is not nice.
Yeah. Not good.
So I'm trying to find a very intelligent way of just saying that. But trash is trash. You don't have to really explain. So saying "men are trash" is definitely potentially can be taken as an insult because it's not a nice thing to say. I think I would say that's absolute. The association is not meant to be nice.
And have you heard that phrase used? Because it's a phrase I've heard. I didn't know about it. I know it's been a hashtag. I know that it's been.
Oh, maybe there's a modern context in Me Too, something that I don't know about. There's also that.
Well,
I would imagine I know, but
that's in the context of where I first heard it. It was from someone. It was from a woman, and it was from and so she runs a matchmaking agency, right? And I'd never heard the phrase "men are trash" or "all men are trash." Both of those things together.
I think I've heard it. I'm pretty sure I've heard it.
Yeah, and I was kind of surprised that it existed. Yeah, yeah, because as she explained it to me, women use it about men.
Yeah. Typically, women use it about men, and typically, I think to explain a little bit, just in case it's not clear, but it seemed clear to me. But maybe it's not clear to everybody. Particularly somebody who's a man who might take it as being offensive, or a young man like one of your students, or one of my students as well, or anybody who's listening, which is part of our the audience that we say this is for. So when somebody, and typically a woman, says "men are trash," what she really means is, I've had a really crappy experience with a man who was a horrible person to me, or many men, or several men, or more than one man. And so I'm applying a general denominator on the experience that I've had. So I'm going from one specific or one or several specific experiences that I've had or that friends of mine have had, and just going a wider umbrella to all men are trash. So
which is kind of how our brains work with information.
Yeah, it's just
simplify everything.
It's simplifying and generalizing everything. Well, in this case, relationships and experiences that a woman has had with a man. Not only, but that it's not the only reason, but that's the general where that statement comes from. right?
Yeah. Now, do you find it offensive? Do you personally find it offensive?
No, because I don't take it personally.
Now, and that's what I was about to say, because the question is the sentence "men are trash" offensive? When I think whenever, and I'm going to generalize it a little bit, but like whenever somebody says anything offensive, I might have a reaction to it. I might get upset or angry or whatever, because I see it as offensive. But that for me doesn't tend to last that long, because I think for me, I realize that what someone is saying, and maybe it's because I'm a psychology teacher, what someone is saying says more about them.
Yeah.
And
I don't get offended by a lot, just to say, like, to begin with. There's not a lot that offends me. And I tend to have like both humor and mind that is extremely offensive that I have to keep in check most of the time. Or I try to keep in check and sometimes fail. But I mean, particularly in this, but people talk about we're in a very politically correct type of environment, which I think is kind of true, if not completely true. Now, on the other hand, it is also very, very good that there's a lot more, I think, or at least in my neck of the woods, that I get to see the world I see through, which is a lot of the weird type of stuff that we talked about, that acronym, because I am a white guy, educated and all that, kind of lefty leaning, well-meaning, I think. So I get to see more and more people called out for horrible behavior as part of the Me Too movement or other things like that, Gamergate, or which is similar, which I think is overall good, that more people that are being horrible to other people get to be called out. But there's also a large part that if there's no understanding or education behind it, then it's just a witch hunt and it doesn't really make much difference, or arguably. And it's difficult because we're talking about a lot of this is online behavior. There's real world behavior that then gets translated into online conversations, hashtags, etc. So when you go to the online world, there's cyberbullying, there's people gaslighting, trolling, and all sorts of other kinds of behavior where you don't even know what's true or not, but it does have real world effects.
Yeah.
I think all men are trash or men are trash is typically because there was a real world experience, whether you were a victim of bullying, cyberbullying, or horrible man, and I've been on a lot of dates. We were just talking about dating before the call started amongst ourselves, and I've used online dating a lot, and we talked about I think we did talk about Aziz Ansari's Modern Romance.
We have before, and
a little bits and pieces, but we didn't really get a question about romance. That's another time. But Master and None has elements. The Netflix show Master and None has elements from that too. But all that to say that I have sat in dinners or drinks or whatever at dates, listening to women tell me about the horrible dates they've had with other men, which you could easily translate and convey to all men or men are trash. Now, if you are a man and you have no collection of this kind of thing, and you'd be like, well, you could find that offensive, because as I said, to say that somebody or a category of people are trash can easily be offensive.
Yeah.
Because so there's a question of climate and context and what is generally culturally accepted or not, right?
So by context, you mean the context within which a statement is happening. By
climate, I was going to talk about the general. I was going to talk about what seems to be, and probably like half or at least one, what seems to be the context in my neck of the wood of educated white people, I guess, or half of American speaking. Like, just it's probably at least half of people. By that I mean, you just look at the U.S. elections. Biden won, which is more on the lefty-leaning, well-meaning Democrat, but that was just over half. There's a lot of people that voted for Trump. So, and I don't know, among the people who voted for Trump, some of them will agree, some of them won't agree with what I'm saying or about to say. What I'm about to say is, and referring back to the Me Too movement and et cetera, it seems to be, because there's more and more women speaking out about horrible stuff that men have been doing, more acceptable to say that men are trash, meaning less offensive, than for me to say publicly women are trash. or even less acceptable, like, because this is like in the context of Black Lives Matter and anti-racism, it would definitely be not acceptable and entirely offensive. And I'm just earmarking this, so don't pull it out of context.
Yeah.
But for me to say brown or Black people are trash, that's big time offensive.
Yeah.
Now, technically, and I'm sure some people would make the argument to say that it's as offensive to say that men are trash. Now, I don't find any of those things offensive because I think it's the person speaking that is as a cause, as you said. So there's a world where you could take it as, well, if to say that a category of people, LGBT people, gay people, Black people, Christian people, Muslim people, are trash and women are trash, then it's equally unacceptable to say that men are trash, which is a completely valid argument. And in which case, yeah, it's offensive. So generally speaking, as a general matter, I would say to answer the question, is the statement men are trash offensive? I would say yes. Do I personally find it offensive? No. And that's where there's subjectivity and context related to the phrase.
I think there's something else I would add in there, is that in what you're saying about power structures as well. And the men, we do live in a patriarchy. Men have the positions of power. White men have the positions of power. And then saying that men are trash in the context of how the power structures are is a kind of, in my opinion, a bit of a childish way of trying to point out what's happening.
Yeah, it's the same. You're right, and it's the same argument that can be made when people go, "Well, no, all lives matter," and you're like, you don't understand that it is the people that are in the minority who are suffering, and until their lives matter, then all lives matter, but only when their lives matter.
Yeah. So I've heard a couple of interesting things about this. So when people say stuff about men, and I do last year, and I've done it a couple of times in my school, I've done an assembly, what does it mean to be a man?
Yeah, and you've got a lot more knowledge and experience than I do on that side of things.
Yeah, and personal experiences as well, both with the race and with the male thing as well. But when I did the assembly, it was really interesting to collect people's opinions. Actually, you would have been proud of me. I thought I ran a very effective communication strategy campaign for my assembly. Yeah, I was really in tune with the news cycle, information cycle of the school, because what I did was I put up posters, eye-catching, picture, headline, question around the school the week before the assembly.
So the assembly was at your school?
Yeah.
To talk about what does it mean to be a man, or what was the
question is, what does it mean to be a man?
Okay, great. That's awesome.
I put that on a poster, A3 piece of paper, white, put that at the top in black, and then had a picture of Trump or Boris Johnson or like a famous rugby player who I can't remember the name of, or David Beckham with his family, or Cristiano Ronaldo standing next to his massive super sports car, with the question, what does it mean to be a man? And if you have any ideas, see Mr. D'Souza. So I did that the week before, collected a ton of ideas, created my assembly, and then presented it. And one of my pupils said, and I think it's brilliant what he said, and I still talk about it, what does it mean to be a man? And his answer was, this is a guy who's like 15, 16. He said, biology defines you, society judges you. And I was like, that's actually really good, because the more you think about it, the more like, wow, that's really good. And I got like answers like, what does it mean to be a man? Having a penis. What does it mean to be a man? Being strong. I got all of those answers. But that kind of nuanced, thoughtful answer really captured a lot of what I thought is really important.
It does match also what we just said about priming, because it rhymes, and so it sounds really profound. Now, if you think about it 2 seconds, you could pull it apart quite easily, but it sounds great.
It does.
Because you could easily say that society and your social structure and what you're born in defines you as much as your gender, but
as much as your biology, though?
I don't know. You could easily argue the point, but it sounds good when you say like
it does.
What was it? Sex defines you, and
biology defines you.
Biology defines you, and society judges you. Well, I mean,
Yeah,
you're a judge for your biology too.
yeah, true, true. Now you would be
For the way
amazing.
that you look like, which is your biology, whatever your gender is.
You'd be amazing at picking it apart, and that's why we have these conversations.
No,
So
but it's a good question. And so that said, I don't want to take away. It's a great thing that the students said. It sounds very thoughtful. And there's a lot to pull apart in that. That is definitely interesting. And it is very important that we talk about the power structure thing that you mentioned, for sure.
yeah,
Completely agree with you.
and that's part of what I was
So
trying to getting to.
the arguable people in the minority, all things considered, which in this case, women talking about men who are being generally overwhelmingly horrible to them. And again, it's like racism, it's a system thing. So it doesn't mean that you personally listening to this have been any horrible to any women, or it also might mean that you have no idea. I generally think I'm a nice guy, but I'm sure there's some women that think I was horrible to them, that I have no idea about, that it was not obvious enough for me to even realize. And this is again, like back to Aziz Ansari, the scandal that happened with him, with that whole, did you ever read that article? We talked about this before.
Yeah, I have read it. I just don't remember a lot of detail about it.
I can't, but basically they had a bad night, a bad dating night with some sex involved, or sexual nature stuff. But you could read in the article, so he was made into a horrible Me Too victim.
He was, yeah.
In that article, but even reading the article, it was clear to anybody reading this that everything was happening in the woman's head and nothing was actually untoward, or arguably. And what she was saying, and it was badly written as well, as you could argue, it was really dramatized. And it's not to take anything away from that woman had a bad experience, but the way it was said in the article and related and talked about was that she was thinking she wanted the kissing to stop, and said she was kissing him in a way, or something like that. I'm paraphrasing, in a way that he should have gotten, that he was not welcome to, while not making any move physically or otherwise to say no to anything. So that from his world, it seemed like they were just kissing.
Difficult.
And not to take anything away from it, of course it happens that you're like taken away from something, and even worse, it really, really, really happens a lot, and just horrible amounts of unwanted and clearly unwanted things, of rape nature, and without even going to that, you just, I heard recently of a date just having coffee and hearing just blatantly racist stuff, or just sexual misogynistic comments, of a guy who just wouldn't stop speaking, and not listen to a word that they're saying. Or,
and I'm talking about like the sexual bullying kind of stuff with my form. They're 14, 15, and they're beginning to explore it. But when I point out the power structures, it really makes them think, because they never really considered it. And then the thing that often gets forgotten in the UK, the biggest killer of men under 45 is suicide. Like, but it doesn't get talked about, and it's not a small number either. And I can't remember the numbers, and I really should.
Yeah,
memory.
And I was talking also, and here's the other thing that's interesting, and where we get stuck, as in we men. So the whole power structure thing is very important to talk about. And I was also talking with a friend about this book that I shared with you that I have not read yet. So I'm only just hearsay talking about this, called The Rational Man. And apparently this book was from a dude who writes this blog about masculinity, and they talk about positive masculinity, I think, who, this is the way it was described to me, who pulled a lot of knowledge from the pickup artist community, and who was like, okay, well, these guys are kind of trashy, but there's a lot to be learned from what they discovered, and pulls it apart and mixes it in with psychology of the kind, I think, of Thinking Fast and Slow and other types of psychology, to better understand how women function. And so there's the whole side of the power structure, and men dominating the patriarchy, and women not wanting to be, demeaned, disrespected, or anything like that, which kind of makes sense. But there is also a whole thing about being masculine as being strong, and women want that kind of thing. And it's true, they do. And many of them might say, no, they don't, but they do. They want to be comforted. They want to be, and maybe even just me saying this is a trigger or something to be disagreed with. But I think it rings so true, but there's a certain, and so you feel stuck between a rock and a hard place as a man, where you're like, well, wait a minute, I need to make sure that I'm strong, confident, comforting, but also understanding and not forceful. And I don't know what that means. And which is also why I think those conversations are really rich and interesting, to talk about what positive masculinity might mean when you're like, you have a razor's edge path. It feels like you have a razor's edge path, because you can be, and you will, I think we all make mistakes at that point. And just because relationship between human beings are complicated, and we make mistakes anyway.
But everyone's looking for a simple answer, and there isn't one. And I don't think it's too much to say that there's a masculinities having a massive wobble. Like, I don't know if it's a crisis, but a huge wobble. And there is a way through it. And I'm talking partly from personal experience about questioning my own masculinity a lot, and even more so recently. But with like trying to have children and not having children, and questioning my own masculinity, and diagnosed with testicular cancer and surviving that, is like, well, am I a man or not? What makes me a man? What makes a man? And then for me, coming to the conclusion that it's my creation. And I'm doing Movember, as I do every year, and I think there's strength in emotional awareness, emotional responsibility, because being a human being is such a rich experience. Like, I'm a man, and why would I want to be strong, silent, tough the whole time? Because that's, to me, denying a whole bunch of the richness of being sad, angry, frustrated, upset, deeply, profoundly, like, moved, inspired, all of that. Not just, it's supposed to be that.
The even tougher thing is all the other experiences that you mentioned is the way to learn to be those things as well as strong. They're not actually opposites.
No, they're not.
So in the eyes of a woman, I think what is attractive is if you can be vulnerable and strong at the same time. How do you convey both of those things without being forceful?
And that's my thing for doing Movember.
And I think it's possible, even though it sounds opposite.
It does.
And that's usually what's the most attractive to, and we're obviously talking about heterosexual normative kind of things, most of it, but that's what I know most about. I can't comment most for other types of experience.
But I think it's attractive for people when people.
It is attractive for people, yes.
And I think it comes down to being real. Like, that's how I describe it. Like, if I can responsibly express my sadness or my anger or my happiness, then there's nothing hidden about what's going on. And that's what certainly I've discovered in sharing everything I've been dealing with. People have like, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
Like, as I've referred to it, or as I've heard it referred to, emotion. I'm not talking about emotional incontinence on the part of men, like, because then it just becomes a dramatic, over-the-top expression of, like, I don't know, because there's no responsibility in it, in my opinion.
But I mean, people in general, you're also right. Even though the stereotypes of each gender are more associated with that kind of thing, in general, we don't really, I think, unless well, maybe sometimes, generally you don't really respond great to people whining.
Yeah.
Just whatever the gender is, I'm like, oh, that person's whining, I don't want to hang out with them. So stereotypically, whining might be correlated to being weak, and that's more correlated to stereotypically the female gender. And in France, that we even call it, the historical thing is to call it the weak gender.
Wow.
Yeah, I know it's fucked up. But anyway, sorry for it's messed up. Apologize for nobody heard the swear word. We're not supposed to be swearing on the show. Yeah, it's called the weak sex, the weak gender, or the weak sex, le sexe faible. And, you know, being strong, forceful, etc., being stereotypically associated with men. But yeah, really, just we don't like. And if you talk about whine, if you mean weak as in whining, nobody likes a whiner. It doesn't matter on gender.
Do you know what's really funny? Like, my favorite class last year to teach have now this year, in the year where they're going to be sitting their A-levels, sitting their exams to go to university, well, COVID or no COVID, they've become my most frustrating class, because they're whining. There's one people in particular, they're just like, what? I'm getting annoyed with them.
And we might also, everybody whines at some point or another.
Yeah.
But some people over-index on whining as a strategy as part of their personality. But it sounds like your whole class does.
And they're teenagers and they're discovering and they're frustrated and they have to communicate it and they're worried about exams. So what I realized was it's not personal. And this is indicative of the frustration that challenge that young people must be dealing with, like preparing for exams that they might or might not have to sit. It's horrible.
This whole year is horrible. It's really frustrating. And I just actually talking about that, I'm apparently one of the only teachers who just talked about acknowledging the fact that this is horrible.
Really?
Yeah, I'm not sure, but I don't think any others are just mentioning this. I just, at the beginning of the second lockdown, I just took a few minutes at the beginning of each of the class to talk about the fact that, okay, guys, I realize I can't even imagine how horrible this must be for everybody, because it is for me, and I'm not even dealing, and I'm not 20. So just so you know, I understand and I get, if there's anything you want to talk about, I'm around. If anybody wants to say something now, they can. So we just had a bit of a conversation with some of my classes at the beginning of the lockdown.
I think I do it too. And
just to give some space, and yeah, they appreciate it. I didn't take that much time. I was like, all right, let's move on to other things now. But it was just like, you have to acknowledge the context.
There's a lot of that we're talking about today.
I think you have to acknowledge the context.
Yeah, the context. You talked about the climate versus the context. Is there a difference?
No, I think the climate is a way to talk about the context. I think it's a figurative way to talk about how things generally feel. But what's tricky with that and dangerous is, back to this kind of thing about the social dilemma, is what seems to be the general weather. So right now it's a bad day. It's raining in Paris. It's kind of a little, low clouds type thing. So that's the weather. So I could be talking about the weather to you right now. Mm-hmm. You're in London. You might have I don't know what the weather is for you, but if I talk about the weather and talk about how dour and everything it is, and I'm going to assume that you have the same weather, but you're not in the same place. So you might have different weather. Mm-hmm. So in exactly the same way, what seems to be the climate and the weather for me in what I see of the world through what I hear from friends, but a lot through what I see in social media, may not be the same at all to you. And I said half because I was talking, it's easy to talk about how divided some of the countries are, because that's the narrative that we see in social media and the media, generally speaking. But there's a lot more to that. There's age groups, there's different styles, there's all sorts of different divisions. And the world is been made to seem increasingly personalized, because that's how all the windows to the world that we have, which is our phone, where's my phone? This window to the world, that seems like we see the whole world because we're connected to friends all around the world, but it's curated so that you only have one unique view that is not representative of the world, because you can't actually see a version of the world because it's just too much for you to comprehend.
Yeah. So
or at least the last part is one way to say it. There's more to it, but
so we simplify it to a hashtag or to a pithy little statement.
So that's what I mean by the climate, is that it is what I see of the world, which is what I think is the world looks like. And it's easy for me to say that's the climate. And a number of people will be either like, no, that's not the climate at all. Or other people will be, oh, yes, that is. But not being clear what we're talking about. It's just like whatever your version of the world looks like. And to some people, what we're saying would be just complete makes sense. Or maybe to some other people, which is like your pupils or mine, they see a completely different world because they're not at all following the same things I am on social media at all, possibly. That's really difficult, because I have to, this is system 1, system 2. My system 2 has to check and go, oh, wait a minute, you don't actually know what the world looks like, even though it really seems like you do, because you just look out the window and, oh, no, it's cloudy, it's raining.
And that's I have evidence, and like. It's true, because I've got evidence, and it has to be this way. And that's what I find interesting about growing up not being white and trying to like fit in and being desperate to fit in and realizing that my worldview is valid, even if it is different, and then wanting to squash my worldview to fit in with someone else's. There's a teacher online who talks about decolonizing the curriculum in the UK. And I think he's on Instagram as the Teacherist, Instagram and Twitter, the Teacherist UK.
What does that even mean? I'm not sure. It doesn't want to talk about colonization, or
no? What he means is that a bit like telling the truth about British history. And I talk about it all the time in school, and people are like, no, you can't say that. So we have this thing that we're supposed to teach in UK schools called British values. There are 4 British values: democracy, rule of law, the tolerance of people of a different faith or of no faith, and one other one, which is liberty or something. I can't remember. I don't know what it is. But we're supposed to integrate all of those into all of our lessons. And I facetiously changed British values to rape and pillage, undermine, destroy, command and conquer, divide and rule, or something, some other thing.
That's great, because somebody needs to teach that stuff.
Yeah, and
France is the same. We're not supposed to teach it, and like the massive things on no, we don't talk about colonialism. We're not gonna. Let's not come over like any kind of racism, and secularism is often a way to hide it all. Really.
Now it gets more subtle than that with decolonization, because the language of colonization is baked into the curriculum. It's baked into everything. There's no alternative worldviews. Like, and Hitler's famous quote: "Nobody ever asked the victor if he told the truth." Right. So, I asked people who said that, and they say, like, whoever.
I didn't know it was a Hitler quote.
Yeah, Hitler said that, which I thought was interesting. So, decolonizing the curriculum is about removing there's one view, one worldview. This is the worldview. That's my understanding and explanation of it. Now he said something that I found really interesting on Instagram, which was, anytime you talk about bringing people together, we need to unify, we need to whatever, which sounds great. That's actually from the position of someone in charge. That's in the position of the majority. We need to unify. It's their view saying we need to do this, rather than taking into account the range of views that exist. And looking
there's also a different point of view that you have as a teacher. The point of view of the state and the global, the country, is that you are an agent for everybody to fall in line, so that we have a cohesive kind of thing.
Which is,
you're like, no, I want to teach them to think for themselves, which is, and the state or the government or as an entity, not as a single person, be like, no, just slap you around. That's not your job. Your job is for everybody to fall in line, so that everybody can say we're British or French or whatever.
And the school system is perfect for creating cogs in the machine. And sometimes I feel like, a few years ago, I used to feel like my lessons are just anarchic. There's too much talking. People are talking over each other. There's not listening. It goes quiet. They should all be doing exactly as they're told. And over the years, I've realized that doesn't matter. That doesn't mean they're not learning. It doesn't mean they're not thinking. And there is whilst I have to respect the teacher-student, I'm trying to squash it as much as I can. There are moments where they will listen where I need them to listen to me and to listen to each other and explore those views. And it's occasionally really tiring and really difficult. But it was at your 40th, actually, where I'd had 2 cards from 2 pupils really thanking me for the difference I'd made to them. And I don't know if it was the richness of the people at your 40th or the richness of the conversation or whatever was happening, but that was a moment where I realized I don't have to hate being a teacher anymore. I have something to offer. Wow. And I did a real 180 from wanting to leave teaching to going to actually, no, I got something to offer here because I love people and I want to contribute. And
I had no idea that happened at my birthday.
Yeah, it did.
Or that summer, anyway.
It was that summer, and I came back and I did a video on my Instagram. I was like, I've done a 180,
which was last year, not that long ago. I mean, it goes fast, but yeah.
Yeah, it was 2019.
Mm-hmm.
It feels like it was longer, but because so much crappy stuff has happened. But then I have something to offer. We have something to offer in these conversations, and exploring potentially triggering statements like "men are trash" is one way of beginning to discover there are other worldviews, there are other ways of thinking about it, And it isn't about trying to find out what's true. It's trying to discover and create who you are within all of it.
Yeah.
Which is a really cool way to link back to last episode, but it sounds like I'm summing up.
I would add one thing for the summary, that I would say specifically generalizing or tending to generalize things will be more offensive.
Well,
if you want to be less offensive, then say that guy that I dated was trash. If you want to give an opinion
about what you just said, specifically generalizing.
I know, it's funny.
Did you know you said that?
After I said it.
Say it again, because I talked over you. Specifically.
No, it's fine. It's fine. So the other thing to finish, which is what I said earlier, is to answer the question, is the statement "men are trash" offensive? Because it's a generalization, yes, it is offensive. Not necessarily to everybody, and there's reasons why we explained in the show. I would take it as a better stance if you want to insult someone because you had a bad experience with them, be specific about that person. That guy was trash, maybe even because. And when we're angry and hurt, it's an automatic reaction to generalize, because you're just wiping out the whole possibility of men for women, for example, or vice versa, or whatever. I hate broccoli. You don't hate all broccoli, only the one you try. You might find the broccoli dish for you. It's possible. So I would say then be specific. And also being specific about the experience allows you to, forces you, depending on what your frame of mind is at that particular point, to confront what it is that you're upset about or angry about.
Oh, that's brilliant.
Because as long as you go general, I hate all broccoli. You're like, wait, how did you have your broccoli? Well, it was boiled to shreds. Otherwise, that's their problem. If you have it in a curry, for example, and just like not overcooked and a little bit crunchy, then that's the way to go.
No, you see, the profound thing you're saying, talking about broccoli, you're making the point. It's brilliant, because the generalizations allow me to avoid confronting my challenging experiences and actually owning them, even though those experiences could be really useful in discovering, creating, finding out whatever it is. And wherever I
and I get that it is hurtful because you were hurt by the experience, so it's easier to be general. And it's similar to saying, well, where does it hurt? It hurts everywhere. It's like, well, no, it's got to hurt somewhere.
And naming it, owning it, begins the process of being able to articulate what's happening.
And it's more difficult, but that's what's more valuable, because you can own a process. As long as you don't know, are you hurting here or here or here, or then you can't be. I can't help you if I don't know where you're hurting. Now, I don't mean to say I'm not going to help you, and it starts with the person asking the question or saying so in the first place, or listening. And I guess the other side of the question is, well, if you are offended by somebody saying so, saying men are trash or saying that kind of generalization, as we said earlier, it's probably not personal. So depending on the circumstances and who's telling that and who's saying it and how you feel about it, then it might be appropriate to tell the person that you're offended. Or sometimes it might not be appropriate, or it might not be the best time. You're like, well, I don't know, if that person is drunk and is going to hit you, then you're like, all right, cool, just like forget it. I don't know, I'm just making up a horrible situation, but or if it's somebody saying so online and you want to write in the comments, you're not wrong, but that doesn't usually lead to anything but Facebook having more money for advertising revenue.
Yeah, that's true. Or several hours wasted time of getting sucked into
just discussions by comments. If it's important enough and it's somebody you know, then send them a text message or have a phone call. If it's not important, then you can abstain. Or if you really want to waste time, then you can go on a comment flame war, but you're not going to convince anybody of anything. And that's part of the reason why I got a little bit off of Facebook and comments in general. A little bit more time on Reddit watching funny GIFs.
Reddit's amazing, and I got to be really careful.
I have to be
careful. My life away. more so than YouTube or Facebook or whatever, because
Well, you
I
can
just
choose.
it's
What I
instant.
like about Reddit is you can choose the stuff so that you're
Yeah,
generally interested in it,
yeah,
and you get to curate your feed a little bit more. So the algorithms choose what you're seeing of it, but you choose your subreddits. So it's a little bit more actively personalized than, say, Facebook or Instagram, that decides entirely for you what you should be seeing of all of your friends.
yeah,
So that's personalized by the algorithm entirely. Whereas, yeah, Reddit has a little bit more control over. So I know that generally, most of the time, I'm not going to get horribly depressing news if I open Reddit, which is
yeah. You
like
can
in the
have a
past couple of weeks, I prefer that to when I'm just wasting a little bit of time online.
just you know watch a cat gif something. That's what the internet's for.
Exactly.
Memes of cats. Great.
So I think there was a pretty good roundup of the question, right?
It was. It
Is
was
there
your
anything else missing on? No, I think no.
same
No, if
time.
you're offended, here's if you are offended by that sentence or another similar one, generally we don't realize that we're offended when we're immediately reacting to something, which is also where the benefit of things like meditation helps.
Yeah.
Or there's a French saying, which is very stupid, that my mom used to say a lot when I was a kid, which is roll your tongue 7 times in your mouth before you speak. I don't know where it comes from. That's the literal translation of it. Basically meaning don't react. Think about what
Yeah.
you're going to say before you say it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if you're offended,
Challenge.
it's immediately, well, it is a challenge because usually you react and then you think, oh, I said that and I got angry, but you don't even know you're angry because you're in the middle of it. So if you are able to, so meditation is one of the tools and the main one that I use to allow, it gives me a buffer, that buffer to say, oh, I am being offended by what's going on. Let me not speak immediately.
And
Which
yeah, it
is
generates
just
self-awareness, everything.
changing the intuition of your system 1 to your system 2. It's giving more space to system 1 so that you're going, oh, wait, there's something going on here.
That's
It's
great.
another way to interpret it.
Yeah.
Cool.
Cool.
Thank you. That was a good question.
It was. And we'll do this again next week.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for the conversation as usual. Always awesome.
Yeah. Great.